I've never been one to snoop. Honestly, I used to pride myself on that. Trust, I believed, was what made a marriage last. You build a life together, raise kids, make sacrifices, and through it all, you believe that the person sleeping next to you isn't hiding a second life behind their smile. That was always enough for me. Or maybe I just needed it to be. But that night, at Jessica's corporate party, I noticed something that made the ground shift. Just a little. Not an explosion. Not a screaming match or some dramatic revelation. Just a moment. A detail. The party had barely begun. People were still arriving, coats still being taken off, the bar not yet crowded. I was holding a glass of white wine, making small talk with one of her coworkers, someone from the HR department whose name I forgot the second they said it. And out of the corner of my eye, I caught Jessica standing by the tall glass windows near the catering table, her phone held just below waist level. She smiled at the screen. It was a very particular kind of smile. Not the kind you give when reading a funny meme or a message from your mom. It was a soft, closed-lip smile. A secret smile. And then she did something I hadn't seen her do before, not even at home. She brought the phone closer to her chest, angled it away from the room, and tapped the screen quickly before locking it and sliding it into her purse. I probably wouldn't have thought much of it, except for the look on her face when she realized I was watching. Her eyes widened for just a split second. A flicker. Her shoulders tensed, then immediately dropped into a casual pose. She turned to me and gave this little dismissive laugh. "Oh, Evan's being ridiculous again," she said. "You know how people flirt when they're drunk at these things." And then, just like that, she shifted. "Do you want to grab some food? They have those little sliders you like." I smiled, nodded, walked with her to the buffet table, but my stomach had dropped through the floor. She'd said his name so casually. Evan. That was the new guy in her marketing department. I'd heard the name before, sure. He'd come up a few times over the past few months. She described him as smart but a little cocky, and mentioned how he always had too much cologne on. That had been her go-to joke about him. And yet, she knew exactly what message I'd seen. She didn't even ask what I was looking at. Didn't ask what I thought. She knew. That's the part that bothered me most. I didn't say anything at the time. I just nodded and tried to pretend like everything was fine. That was the part one played supportive husband at a corporate function. Smile, shake hands, laugh when appropriate. No need to make a scene. But deep down, something had cracked. It wasn't just the heart emoji. It wasn't just the way she hid it. It was the years of subtle shifts in her behavior that all started crashing down around that one moment. We'd been married for 9 years. Not perfect, but solid, or so I thought. We had 2 kids, a mortgage, the whole routine. Dinners together when we could manage it, family outings on the weekends, movie nights, shared calendars. Normal life. Maybe that's why I didn't notice things changing at first. But they had. I just hadn't wanted to face it. Over the past few months, Jessica had started buying new clothes, high-end, fashionable pieces that didn't exactly fit the budget-conscious version of her I'd always known. She'd claimed they were just little splurges or discounted online. But they didn't feel random. They felt curated, like someone trying to impress. Then there was the gym. She'd always been reasonably active, but lately, she'd doubled her workouts. New trainers, private sessions, long hours, even on weekends. She claimed it helped her clear her head. I didn't question it much. I was working overtime, managing a new product rollout for my own company. I figured maybe it was a phase. But now, I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The way she smiled at that message. The instinct to hide it. The name? Evan. It played on a loop in my head as the night wore on. I watched her closely after that. The way she moved through the crowd, leaning in a little too close when talking to coworkers, laughing louder than usual, holding her wine glass like it was an accessory. I realized how distant she felt. She was there, physically right next to me, but her energy was somewhere else. She wasn't acting like my wife. She was acting like a woman performing a role she no longer believed in. I excused myself after an hour, told her I needed to make a work call, and stepped out to the balcony. I stood there in the cool night air, phone in hand, staring out over the city lights. I didn't call anyone. I just needed space to think. What bothered me more than the message itself was the pattern it fit into. The passwords on her devices that changed without telling me. The late nights at the office that didn't match her Outlook calendar. The sudden work trips to cities she'd never been to before, with vague agendas and no real follow-up afterward. The way our int asterisk Macy had cooled off gradually, until it was like trying to connect with a ghost. And worst of all, the way she always had a ready excuse. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. By the time I came back inside, Jessica was deep in conversation with a group of people I didn't recognize. Evan wasn't in sight, but I had the strange feeling he had been earlier. Maybe slipped away just before I returned. Maybe not. Either way, she barely noticed me re-enter the room. She was laughing, glass in hand, radiant under the dim chandeliers. She looked beautiful, confident, like someone in control. I stood at a distance for a while, pretending to scroll through my phone, but really just watching. That's when I realized something that shook me. I didn't know her anymore. Not fully. I knew the mother of my children, the woman who used to fall asleep with her head on my chest, the one who used to get excited about weekend flea markets and Sunday pancakes. But the woman in front of me? She was someone else. Or maybe she had always been that person and I had just stopped seeing it. That message, that damn heart emoji, wasn't just a flirty joke. It was a slip, a glimpse through the cracks in the mask. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee the fault lines running through our entire relationship. I didn't sleep much that night. Back at home, after the kids had gone to bed and she'd finally come upstairs, still smiling like nothing had happened, I lay in bed next to her, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every moment I'd written off as innocent. The time she canceled our anniversary dinner because of a last-minute work emergency. The expensive bottle of cologne in our guest bathroom. The one she said a coworker had given her as a team gift. The sudden interest in evening yoga classes that didn't appear on her Apple calendar when I checked. I thought about our conversations lately, how surface level they'd become. She didn't ask about my day anymore, not really. We talked logistics, schedules, grocery lists. But we hadn't connected. Not in months. Lying there in the dark, listening to her soft breathing, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know how long this had been going on. I didn't know how far it had gone. But I knew, with a clarity that made my stomach turn, that something was going on. And whatever it was, it had started long before that heart emoji popped onto her screen. That was just the moment I finally woke up. The morning after the party, I woke up before Jessica. The sunlight bled through the curtains, casting long, sharp lines across the hardwood floor. She was still asleep beside me, face turned toward the wall, her breathing slow and steady. If I didn't know better, I could have convinced myself everything was fine. But I did know better. The smile at the party, the locked phone, the name on the screen. All of it played through my mind like a skipping record. I hadn't confronted her. Not yet. I wasn't ready. It's strange how betrayal doesn't hit like a hammer. It seeps in like cold water, slow and paralyzing. You think you'll explode, but instead you go quiet. You start calculating. That's what I did. I started paying closer attention. That morning, I noticed her phone wasn't on the nightstand. It was tucked inside her purse, zippered shut on the floor on her side of the bed. Normally she left it charging overnight, face up like I did. But now, always locked away, always on silent. She stretched a little and mumbled something about a headache. I might skip breakfast, she said, pulling the comforter tighter around her. Just not feeling great. I nodded, made coffee, fed the kids, and pretended I wasn't unraveling inside. The next week passed like a slow bleed. Jessica was suddenly busier than ever. Meetings, trainings, last-minute errands, random delays on the way home from work. She talked a lot about Q4 projections and how the marketing team was under pressure. But her voice was always tired, her eyes distant, like she was working overtime just to keep her lies organized. There were moments I almost said something. I'd watch her laughing at a text while stirring her tea, or catch her glancing at the door a little too quickly when her phone buzzed. But I held back. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I wasn't ready to hear her lie to my face. I needed proof. Then came the next company event. It was a formal thing: dinner, presentations, awards. She insisted I come, said she wanted me there, even picked out my suit for me. Her tone was bright, her movements practiced, like she was trying to overcorrect for the tension she could feel hanging between us. I didn't push back. I said I'd go. I wore the suit, smiled when she asked me to. But underneath it all, I was watching her. The event was held at a hotel ballroom downtown. Flashy decorations, jazz band in the corner, open bar. I shook hands, nodded at small talk, accepted drinks I didn't finish. She moved through the crowd with ease, like she owned the place. Then, an hour in, she vanished. No goodbye, no excuse. 1 second she was beside me, chatting with someone from legal, and the next, gone. I looked around casually at first, assuming she'd gone to the restroom or stepped out for air. But after 10 minutes passed, then 15, then 20, I started walking the room. No Jessica. Not near the bar. Not on the patio. Not at her table. I texted her, "Hey, where'd you go?" No response. I called. Straight to voicemail. The air changed then, like everything had finally clicked into place. I stepped outside into the cool night and walked toward the valet entrance. My chest was tight, my jaw clenched. I didn't know exactly what I was expecting, but I knew what I feared. And then I saw it. Jessica, slipping into a black Audi. Not our car. She wasn't alone. Evan was holding the door open for her, dressed in a charcoal suit. Casual like this was nothing new. She was laughing, carefree. She touched his arm as she climbed in. And then the door shut. The car pulled off before I could move. For a long moment, I stood there frozen, phone in hand, heart thudding in my ears. I'd always imagined betrayal would look different. Tears, guilt, some kind of apology. But this was polished, rehearsed. This was her walking willingly into another man's world. I drove home that night in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the low hum of the road beneath my tires and the burning weight of everything I had just witnessed. My phone stayed quiet. No missed calls, no texts. She didn't come home until morning. I was sitting in the living room, lights off, staring into nothing when I heard the door click open. She tiptoed in, heels in hand, moving like a thief trying not to wake the house. When she turned the corner and saw me, she jumped. "Michael," she gasped, eyes wide, clutching her coat. It wasn't her coat. It was Evan's. The monogram stitched on the inside confirmed it. Her hair was messy, lipstick faded. Her blouse was wrinkled and half untucked. She looked like someone who hadn't been home all night and wasn't sorry about it. She started, but the words caught in her throat. I didn't say a word, just stood up, walked past her, and went upstairs. Whatever illusion we'd both been clinging to shattered the second she walked through that door. From that moment on, I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some emotional affair that hadn't gone too far. This was real, physical, active. She was with him, and now that I knew the truth, it changed everything. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't confront her. That would have given her the control, the drama, the denials, the spinning of guilt. No, I stayed quiet. I stayed calm. I got strategic. That morning, after she went upstairs to shower, probably hoping to wash the night off her skin, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. He was a friend from college. We hadn't spoken in months, but he answered on the second ring. "Mike," he said, "everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be." I told him I needed a forensic accountant. Someone discreet. Someone fast. He didn't ask why. That week, while Jessica played house, I played detective. Quietly, carefully, I collected receipts, scrubbed our bank history, looked at our joint credit card charges. And the story unfolded like a novel she never meant for me to read. Transfers to an account I hadn't known existed. Uber rides to hotels across town. Airline bookings for two, booked under company expense reports. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning something. And worse, she was using our money to do it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed everything in place. I started sleeping in the guest room. I told her I had some work deadlines, pretended nothing was wrong. And every night, when she said good night with that fake softness in her voice, I'd smile and say good night back, already planning my next move. But the real breaking point didn't come from her. Came from my son. I don't know if anything could have prepared me for what my son told me that Saturday afternoon. It was around 4 p.m. The house was quiet. Jessica had gone to the gym, a phrase that had started sounding more like a code word than a destination. I was in the garage, organizing old boxes we hadn't touched in years, trying to stay busy, to stay sane. That's when Noah, our oldest, 12 years old, smart, observant, and way too mature for his age, walked in holding something behind his back. At first, I thought it was about the new Xbox controller he'd been asking for. But there was something in his eyes, heavy, hesitant. I could tell he wasn't just there to ask for something. "Dad," he said quietly, "can I talk to you for a second?" I wiped my hands on a rag and turned to him. "Yeah, bud. What's up?" He looked around like he was making sure we were alone, then stepped forward and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I need to. I took the paper, my brow furrowed, and opened it. It was a simple drawing, just a crude sketch in pencil. Two people sitting at a table in a cafe. One had long hair, the other had glasses. But what caught my eye wasn't the drawing. It was what was written underneath it in shaky, childlike handwriting. I saw Mom with that guy from her office. They were holding hands. I looked up at him slowly. "Noah, what is this?" His face turned red, and his eyes welled up with tears, but he didn't look away. 2 Fridays ago, me and Lucas went to that coffee shop near school, the one with the orange chairs. We were getting hot chocolate. I saw Mom sitting with a man. I recognized him from her Instagram. She was laughing, and then she held his hand. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I wanted to reach out to tell him it was okay, that he hadn't done anything wrong, but I couldn't lie to him. Not now, not with the truth sitting between us like a bomb. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked gently. He looked down. "Because I thought maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was just her friend. And then I thought if I told you, everything would get worse. I didn't want to break our family." I crouched in front of him, both hands on his shoulders. "You didn't break anything, Noah. Okay. None of this is your fault. You did the right thing telling me." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his hoodie. That was the moment everything changed. Finding messages, catching her in lies, watching her get in that car. That was pain. But hearing it from my son, seeing the quiet hurt in his face as he tried to protect the family, to protect me, that was something else entirely. That was rage. Quiet, dangerous rage. She'd not only betrayed our marriage, she'd pulled our son into her web of deception, forcing him to carry a truth no child should bear. That night, after she came home from the gym, still flushed, still glowing, I told her dinner was ready. She seemed surprised, maybe even suspicious, but she played along. We ate as a family. She told stories from work. Noah was quiet, barely touching his food. I watched her closely, studied her every move, but didn't say a word. The next day, I met with my lawyer in person. The financial investigation had already revealed a mess. She'd funneled nearly $18,000 from our joint account into a personal savings fund over the course of 7 months. Little by little, hiding it under budget categories like travel reimbursement and freelance consulting. She'd booked hotels in cities she'd never visited for work. There were receipts for dinners for two, not reimbursed by her company, always paid in cash. But now, with Noah's story, I had something that no spreadsheet could offer. Undeniable human evidence. My lawyer leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "This changes everything," he said. "The court won't just see infidelity. They'll see emotional harm. You'll have grounds for full custody, Michael." I nodded. "That's what I want. The kids stay with me. And I meant it. I wasn't going to let her paint herself as some overworked wife who made a mistake. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern, a system, and now my son had been pulled into it. We filed for divorce the following Monday. Jessica was served the papers at work. I'd asked for it to be done that way. I wanted her to feel the weight of consequence outside the house. Somewhere public, somewhere she couldn't hide behind charm or manipulation. She didn't come home that night, or the night after. When she finally showed up on Wednesday, she looked like a different person. No makeup, hair pulled back, face pale. "You blindsided me," she said quietly, standing in the doorway. "No," I said, keeping my voice flat. "You blindsided us." I just finally responded. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around the house like it belonged to someone else now. "I guess there's no point in trying to explain," she muttered. "There's nothing to explain," I said. "I saw you leave with him. You came home in his coat. Our son saw you with him at a cafe. There's no misunderstanding here." She blinked. "Noah saw?" I didn't let her finish. "Yeah. And he didn't tell me because he didn't want to break the family. Let that sit with you for a second." Her mouth fell open, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something like shame on her face. But it was too late. She tried to talk after that. Really talk. She admitted to the affair. Claimed it started after a rough patch in our marriage, that Evan understood her and saw her. Whatever that meant. She said it wasn't supposed to go this far, that she just wanted to feel alive again. I listened, quietly, not because I cared about her side, but because I wanted to hear every excuse fall apart under its own weight. When she finally stopped, I stood up. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now I'm making mine." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me, like she expected tears, begging, something to prove she still had control. But that version of me was gone. In the weeks that followed, the court proceedings began. Custody, asset division, everything. Her lawyer tried to challenge the narrative, claiming the affair didn't affect her ability to parent. But the financial records and Noah's confession, along with other witnesses from her office, told a different story. The judge saw through it. He awarded me the house, the business, and full custody. Jessica got visitation rights, supervised twice a month. She moved into a rental on the other side of town. Evan, from what I heard, he started pulling away not long after the divorce filing. Maybe he realized the fantasy wasn't worth the fallout. Or maybe he just wasn't ready to be the villain. Either way, he was gone before the ink dried. The day the judge made his final ruling, I sat outside the courthouse with Noah. I bought him ice cream even though it was freezing out. "Are we gonna be okay now?" he asked me, licking the melting swirl. I looked at him, really looked at him, this boy who had carried a secret no kid should carry. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We're going to be better than okay." And I believed it. The house felt different after the court ruling. Quieter, yes, but not in the heavy, suffocating way it had been before. This was a different kind of quiet. A clean slate, the kind that hums with possibility. There were no more whispers from behind locked doors, no more fake smiles over dinner, no more late-night absences passed off as team drinks. Just me, the boys, and the beginning of something honest. The kids adjusted faster than I expected. Noah especially seemed lighter. His appetite came back. He laughed more. And even though he never said it outright, I could tell he felt relief knowing he didn't have to keep any more secrets. The guilt that had haunted his face since the day he handed me that drawing? Gone. And Ethan, our youngest, only 7, was resilient in the way that only kids can be. He'd ask when he'd see Mommy again, and I'd answer plainly. "Soon. You'll get to see her every other weekend." That seemed to satisfy him. At that age, you want consistency more than explanation. Jessica called once after the ruling. Just once. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was shaky, measured, almost like she'd rehearsed what to say. "Michael, I know I've lost everything. I know I hurt you, and I can't expect you to forgive me. But please, if there's anything left in your heart, please just remember the good years. I don't want my boys to grow up hating me. That's all I'm asking." I didn't respond. Because she was wrong. She hadn't just lost everything. She had given it away, piece by piece, affair by affair, lie by lie. She'd gambled our life for a thrill, and now she was shocked she didn't get to keep the prize. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't badmouth her to the kids. I didn't need to. They would form their own understanding in time. I just made sure they felt loved, safe, and stable. That was my only job now. Over the next few weeks, I cleaned house, literally and figuratively. I packed up everything that reminded me of her without hesitation. The photos from our anniversary trip to Colorado, the ceramic vase she bought at that little gallery downtown, even her favorite mug, the one that said "Wifey," gone. Into boxes, into the garage. I replaced the bedding, painted the bedroom, donated clothes I hadn't worn in years. I even rearranged the furniture in the living room, like I was unlearning the shape of the life we had built. Felt good. And maybe the strangest part of it all? The loneliness never came. You brace for it. You expect the ache. You expect the 2 a.m. spirals and the panic attacks and the silence that feels like it might crush you. But none of that came for me, because the grief had already happened. Months earlier, when I was still sleeping beside a stranger. Now, what I felt was peace. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen making grilled cheese for the boys when Noah came in holding a piece of mail. "Dad, this came for you. It says legal correspondence on the front." I took it, heart sinking slightly. For a moment, I wondered if Jessica was already trying to appeal something. But it wasn't from her. It was from Evan. Typed, formal. One page. "Dear Mr. Callahan, I know I have no right to contact you, and I will respect any boundary you set from this point forward. I'm writing not to justify anything I did, but to acknowledge the damage I helped cause. I didn't fully understand the consequences until I saw what it cost everyone, especially the children. Jessica and I are no longer in contact. Things between us ended shortly after the divorce proceedings began. I have taken a leave of absence from the company and started therapy to confront the person I allowed myself to become. I know these words won't undo anything, but I needed to say them. I'm sorry. I was wrong. And I hope you and your boys find peace. Respectfully, Evan Sharp. I folded the letter and slid it into the junk drawer without a word. It wasn't worth framing. Wasn't worth tearing up either. It just existed. Maybe that was the first adult thing he'd done in this whole mess. But he didn't deserve credit for decency that arrived too late. Jessica never mentioned the end of their relationship. I only heard through the grapevine, co-workers, friends of friends, mutual acquaintances, how quickly Evan had gone silent once things got hard. There were whispers that he'd broken things off through text. Others said he ghosted her after HR started breathing down his neck. Either way, she was alone now. The rented apartment she moved into was in a less glamorous part of town. Not dangerous, but far from the country club circles she used to mingle in. I had to drop the boys off there for their first visitation, and when I pulled up, I almost didn't recognize her. She was thinner, paler. Her hair, once always perfectly styled, was flat and pulled into a loose bun. She wore a faded sweatshirt that used to be mine and jeans that looked 2 sizes too big. She smiled when she saw the boys but avoided my eyes. "Thanks for bringing them," she said, voice quiet, like we were strangers at a bus stop. "They packed snacks," I replied. "They've got everything they need." She nodded. We didn't say anything else. I got in the car and drove away, watching them in the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, I felt sympathy for her. Not forgiveness, not fondness, but sympathy. The consequences had finally caught up, and she had no one left to shift the blame onto. Back home, I found myself reclaiming old parts of me, parts one hadn't seen in years. I picked up the guitar I hadn't touched since college, rejoined my weekend soccer league, even got invited to speak at a local business panel, something Jessica used to discourage because it cut into family time, which I now understood really meant cut into her schedule. It was like discovering that the man I used to be had just been waiting in the corner, patient and quiet, ready to return the second the chaos left. And slowly the house changed. The boys hung their own drawings in the hallway. The fridge became covered in magnets and sticky notes about homework and snacks and soccer practice. We cooked dinner together. Burned a few, saved a few. We even started a Sunday night ritual. Board games, homemade pizza, and nobody allowed to check their phones. It was far from perfect, but it was ours. One night, while putting Ethan to bed, he looked up at me and asked, "Are we going to be like this forever now?" "What do you mean, buddy?" "Just us. Without mommy." I paused. "It's going to be different, yeah, but not bad. And not forever. You'll still see her." He nodded slowly. "I like it better here. It's not as sad." That hit me in the gut. I kissed his forehead, tucked him in, and turned off the light. But his words stayed with me. It wasn't just me who had felt the weight of that house during the final months of the marriage. It was them too. They had felt the silence, the tension, the lies, even if they didn't understand them. And now they were healing, just like I was. That, more than anything, made me sure of the choice I had made. This wasn't about revenge. This was about protection, about peace, about rediscovering the version of myself that could raise two boys with strength, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over our heads. For the first time in what felt like years, I went to bed without dread. No wondering where she was. No questioning the truth. Just quiet. And in that quiet, I found something I thought I'd lost. Clarity. The thing about betrayal is that even after you've swept the broken pieces out the door, the sharp edges linger. There were still moments when it hit me unexpectedly. A song on the radio. A pair of heels tucked behind the closet door that I forgot to box up. A commercial for some getaway destination she used to daydream about. I'd catch myself tensing up, bracing for her voice, before remembering she wasn't here anymore. The silence had changed. It wasn't heavy like before, but it still carried echoes. I guess that's just part of the process. You don't unlove someone overnight, and you don't forget the sound of their footsteps the second they're gone. But there's something honest about that pain. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't ask you to smile through it. It just exists, and over time it gets quieter. By spring, the house felt more like mine than ours. I redid the master bedroom, painted it a cooler gray, put up clean white curtains, and finally replaced that mattress she insisted was firm enough. I bought one that actually made my back stop hurting. Sounds dumb, but that mattress felt like a declaration. Like I was finally sleeping in my own life again. Noah and Ethan were thriving in school. Noah joined the robotics club. Ethan decided he wanted to be a magician. So the living room became a constant mess of playing cards, disappearing coins, and hats that totally had a rabbit inside. I let it happen. Mess was better than misery. Then, one night, about 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Jessica texted me out of the blue. "Do you ever think we could have fixed it?" I stared at the screen for a long time. It was the first message she'd sent that wasn't about visitation schedules or legal paperwork. There was no "hi," no "hope you're well," just that question loaded and dangling. Did I ever think we could have fixed it? I didn't reply right away. I went out to the porch instead, sat down with a beer, and watched the wind move through the trees like it was trying to shake them awake. The truth? There had been a time I would have given anything to fix it. But by the end, I wasn't mourning the loss of our marriage. I was mourning the fact that I'd stayed so long in something that had already rotted from the inside out. And no amount of therapy, apologies, or carefully constructed, "we were both at fault" speeches could have rewritten the truth of what happened. I stared at the blinking cursor for another full minute before I typed my reply. "We lost it long before it broke, Jess. We just didn't want to admit it. I hope you're working on you. The boys deserve that version of you. Take care." She never replied. I didn't expect her to. Some wounds don't close with words. Some are just meant to scar. That weekend, I took the boys on a short trip to the mountains. Just a 2-day cabin rental, nothing fancy. But it felt like hitting reset. We built a fire, grilled marshmallows, watched movies under a blanket, and let our phones die for a full day. Noah looked happier than I'd seen him in months. Ethan found a frog near the creek and tried to name it after every superhero he knew. We laughed until it hurt. And that night, as the boys slept in the loft upstairs, I sat by the fire with a notebook in my lap and finally started writing again. Not journaling, writing. Something I hadn't done in nearly a decade. It was a short story about a man who lives alone on the coast, slowly rebuilding a lighthouse that everyone else has forgotten about. He doesn't do it for recognition or out of duty. He does it because it's the one thing that still makes sense to him. Brick by brick, window by window, he reclaims something sacred. When I finished the first few pages, I didn't recognize my own handwriting. That part of me had been buried for so long, I'd almost forgotten it existed. But there it was, alive again. Back home, I noticed the boys had started referring to the house as Dad's place. Not home. Not Mom and Dad's. Just mine. It stung for a second. And then it didn't. Because the truth is, this was my place now. My rules. My energy. My peace. Jessica's visits remained distant. Polite. Mechanical. She'd come to pick up the boys every other Saturday at noon, stand awkwardly in the doorway, and ask the same questions. Any issues at school? How's Ethan's reading? Did you refill Noah's inhaler? And then she'd leave. I didn't ask about her life. I didn't want to know. Whether she was dating, moving, job hunting. None of it concerned me anymore. But then one Sunday evening, as she was dropping them off, Noah lingered near the door after she left. He hesitated, biting his lip. Dad. Yeah. Do you think Mom's okay? I crouched beside him. Why do you ask? She cries when she thinks we can't hear her, like after bedtime, or in the car. Ethan doesn't notice, but I do. I took a deep breath. She's going through a hard time, I said carefully. People don't always know how to show their feelings the right way. But she loves you, Noah. Never doubt that. He nodded, eyes down. I don't hate her. I just wish she was still the way she used to be. Me too, buddy. Me too. But I didn't say that. Instead, I hugged him and we made popcorn and watched The Sandlot for the 5th time that month. Life didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be safe. As summer approached, the light in our home shifted, literally and figuratively. We started leaving the windows open again. The backyard filled with the sound of soccer balls thudding into fences, laughter from